Hey, some important things to talk about today, Martyn, but let's tackle some of those which are now time sensitive because something's coming up Friday this week, a deadline for listeners to participate. The Australian Law Reform Commission inquiry into Christian schools. What's so important for listeners to know about this inquiry?
Well, it's very important because the Australian Law Reform Commission, which is one of the main bodies that the government relies on to get advice from about law reform, that body has put out a recommendation that the government change the law relating to Christian schools in Australia, and the recommendations threaten the future of Christian schooling. That sounds dramatic, but it's not. They really are quite shocking. And this week is sort of the last opportunity people have to put in their feedback and let the government know that they should not heed the Australian Law Reform Commission's recommendations. Now, those recommendations, the legal jargon is that they want to change Section 38 of the Sex Discrimination Act. But in practice, what that means is three things, essentially. First of all, it means that Christian schools would not be able to prefer staff who practice the faith of the school. And so if you don't have staff that are identifiably Christians in the Christian school, you don't really have a Christian school. We all know that. So that's the first thing that's a threat. The second thing that's a threat, that's threatened, is that Christian schools won't be able to teach Christian ethical beliefs without the threat of being sued and taken to tribunals, etc., by activists all the time, and the activists will probably win. Particularly ethical beliefs around what God's design for sexuality is, what God's design for gender identity is, and all those sorts of controversial things in the culture today, which Christian schools seek to uphold. And the third thing that is threatened is Christian schools' ability to have policies on the school grounds which reflect Christian ethical teaching. So, for example, they might say, well, at a Christian school, it's very important, because God made us male and female, that we wear the uniform of our biological sex, or we use the toilet that aligns with our biological sex, or we sleep in the dormitories on school camp that align with our biological sex, or, hey, at a Christian school, you can't have a gay pride group marching on the Oval at lunchtime, and you can't do this and you can't do that. Of course, we expect that. It's a Christian environment. But unfortunately, Christian schools would be very unlikely to be able to uphold those standards on the school grounds. And so the sum total of those problems is that you don't have Christian schools anymore if these changes are made. It's that serious. The future of Christian schooling is really at risk as a result of these recommendations, and people have this week only to please, and I really, really must ask people, please write to the government and say, please don't follow these recommendations, because the government at the moment is likely to, and we need to change that. And the way people can do that is they just need to go to the Australian Christian Lobby's website, acl.org.au, dead simple, and you'll see the links there. And there's even a help sheet. There's an information sheet and explainer which will assist you to write well in making that submission. It'll only take you a few minutes. It's worth it. We need to save our Christian schools.
Well, it certainly demonstrates, doesn't it, the true value of the Australian Christian lobby when you've got an issue like this, as you say, Martyn, something that could spell the end of authentic Christian schooling in Australia. And the ALRC, the Law Reform Commission, they are inviting public input. So this Friday the 24th is a deadline, and you've got a help sheet for people who will respond to that, take some action. And there might be some listening who are thinking, I've never taken any action like this before. Maybe this is the first time that you're going to turn over a new leaf and do something different. The interesting thing here, though, Martyn, is that, as I understand it, activists are flooding this public survey with all sorts of negative feedback. So there is a battle of numbers here. How does that all work? Do you know?
Well, yeah, there is a battle of numbers. So the government needs to hear sufficient feedback from each side of the issue to know that this is a big deal. And if Christians, if those who care about Christian schools are not having their voice heard, the government will simply say, oh, well, the only voice we heard was the voice in favour of passing these recommendations and compromising Christian schools into the future. Let's go ahead with it. they need to know that it's not that simple. They need to know that there's many Australians out there who love their Christian schools, that, something like a third of students in Australia go to Christian and independent schools, and that those people are not happy with these recommendations. They need to hear their voice. And so that's why if the activists who are on the other side of this issue are flooding the system, we also need to flood the system so that the government can say, oh, hang on, there's a lot of controversy around this. We need to take it easy. We need to reassess this. We need to look more closely. Maybe we can make some changes and tweaks. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to achieve. Might be valuable for me just to add this, Neil, as an aside. I went to a Christian school, and it was a Christian school where the gospel was taught, the gospel was lived out, and Christianity was modelled among the staff, in an exemplary way. And there were a lot of kids at my Christian school who were there not from Christian backgrounds themselves, but actually became Christians in the course of their schooling. There were several in my year level who became Christians at school, and there are several today who are in Christian ministry and who are in pastoral ministry because of the witness of my Christian school and the change that it brought about in their life. And so this is a spiritual thing. I sometimes look at these activist moves and I think, wow, they really, really know how to target the gospel sometimes. And this is one of those moments. And so I'd endorse what you said, Neil. There'll be people out there who have never taken action before. I just want to say, look, this is one of those times. If you're a non-activist, if you're someone who hasn't written into the ALRC or whatever in the past, and you're going to do it once, you should do it now.
Okay, so you've got a link there on the Australian Christian Lobby website. So it's acl.org.au. And find that link for the ALRC inquiry, ALRC, Australian Law Reform Commission, ALRC inquiry.